Jerry, Henry, and George left Bear Stearns in 1976 to start KKR.
Most creative moments really come about when you're blocked off. Henry and I had dinner at Joe and Rose's in New York. He said, well, let's work backwards. What do we really need? And what we really need was a way to pay our overhead for 5 years. If we can't prove that this works in 5 years, we don't deserve to be in business.
I was nervous. I had views that, well, maybe I'm going to be back at Bear Stearns or I'm going to be at some other investment banking firm. But I said, we're going to run as hard and as fast as we possibly can to make sure we never had to go back.
There's two different types of innovation, right? There's the create something that didn't exist before. But critically, and probably far more important, is the ability to continue to evolve how we operate and how we do the things that we're already doing.
Henry's got a favorite saying, which I love, which is, any fool can buy a company.
That's the easy part. The hard part is, how do we create the value out of it? And really working to improve a business once we made the investment was exactly the right formula. I've gone to London a few times. The people that I met with thought I had come from Mars. And so we'd have to explain to them, what it was and how it all worked, and it still didn't make any difference. So in 1999, after having bought 2 or 3 companies, we decided that we would open our office.
The lessons KKR have learned by the European experience is that one size doesn't fit all. And by being willing to adapt to the culture, but not giving up on the core principles of the business, KKR have fused the best things from both to create a machine in Europe that is very effective.
Joe Bay raised his hand. He said, I'd love to start an Asian business.
When I moved to Hong Kong in the fall of 2005, I was literally the first person on the ground. And what we've built in the last 10 years is today the largest alternative platform in Asia by far.
In the early 2000s, we really began to source opportunities that we didn't have the ability to execute. And we began to think of the firm as having a brain, and we were just using a very small percentage of our brain. And so instead of turning down opportunities that would be brought to us, we wanted an ability to be relevant.
We're not obviously just a private equity firm anymore. I mean, in the early 2000s, we went into credit, and since then we've gone into infrastructure, energy, real estate.
A lot of the capital that comes to us from around the world, those organizations represent other people. And in many cases, they're public workers, they're policemen, firemen, people whose pension we're investing. So I think that's a sacred trust, and we've got a huge fiduciary duty to make sure that we do a very good job.
My first impression of KKR was probably the general impression I had of all private equity companies. They were big. They made their money not necessarily by improving the value of companies. At the last convention of my union, part of the focus was on sending a message to George Roberts and Henry Kravis about acting more responsibly. And here we are now, 8 years later, with a realization that they've been very good union employers when they've owned companies that are unionized. They've done a lot about wellness. Now they're moving on to profit sharing. What surprised me the most is that KKR understands that part of that ability to provide good returns is also to be good neighbors, good friends, good to the environment, and good to the people it employs.
I can remember George saying it, and he sort of said it in passing, and it sort of hit me like a ton of bricks. It was such a simple statement, but actually so true. You can be the smartest guy in the room, but if people don't like you or they have reason not to trust you, then nothing will happen from there.
The entirety of KKR was built on partnership and trust. It started with Henry and George and the partnership and trust they have with each other, but then it evolved.
We have some LPs that have been with us since the late 70s, and in many ways, we look at these people like a family.
There's no firm we're more comfortable working with. We wouldn't be in a half a dozen different things with them if we didn't have that feeling.
The culture of investment banking, which George, Henry, and Jerry came out of, was not about teamwork. So it was very competitive internally as well as externally. And when they started their firm, they didn't want any of those internal competitive dynamics. So they created a system that didn't have that, and it worked.
There's a huge piece of what powers this organization, which I think is about people feeling like they don't want to let the other person down.
world is a mosaic, and if we're going to invest in this world, we better have people here that understand that mosaic. So George and I are very much on a campaign right now to make sure that we hire diverse people. That's diverse ethnicity, gender, and thinking.
I hope the culture and values and what we stand for in the market is the same.
Other than that, I hope this firm changes dramatically over the years, because I know the world will change.
You can't stand still in this business. You have to constantly question what you're doing, how you're doing it, how can you do better.
We have to keep innovating. We have to keep growing. And I'm sure that if we do all of that, we will do very well in the future.